I had been carrying a secret for 10 years, a truth so heavy that it shadowed every moment of my marriage. For a decade, I lived in fear that if I revealed it, everything I had built would crumble. Our life in New York seemed perfect to the outside world. We had a beautiful home, friends who envied our stability, and a family routine that looked ordinary and happy. My husband was attentive, charming, and outwardly loving. Yet beneath that perfection, I held a secret that could destroy everything. For 10 years, I hid it, waiting for the right moment, for a time when it might feel safe to share. I told myself that love meant protecting those I cared about, that silence was a way to keep peace. But the weight of the secret grew heavier with each passing year. Every small disagreement, every tense moment, reminded me that this truth could not stay buried forever. One evening, after a long day, I decided it was time. I could no longer carry the burden alone. I needed honesty, even if it meant shaking the foundation of my marriage. I remember the time and place vividly. It was late in the evening, the living room softly lit, our children asleep in the other room. My husband sat across from me, relaxed and unsuspecting. I had rehearsed my words silently for hours, preparing myself for a reaction I could not predict. The secret left my lips, and for the first few seconds, there was silence. I felt relief, a fleeting sense that the weight was lifting. But that relief vanished instantly. His face changed. The calm, controlled man I had known for 10 years vanished. In its place, I saw anger, disbelief, and an intensity that shocked me to the core. Before I could move, he lunged forward, hands around my neck, choking me with cold, sudden violence. The sensation of being choked is unforgettable. My vision blurred, my chest tightened, and terror filled every inch of my body. I realized in that moment that everything I had feared was true, not about the secret, but about the danger in my own home. The man I had trusted to love and protect me had become a threat to my life. I struggled to breathe, fought against the pressure, and felt a sudden surge of clarity. I could not stay. I could not wait. My survival depended on immediate action. I pulled away, gasping, terrified but determined. The act of violence had ended, but the reality remained. My life, and possibly my children's, was at risk if I stayed. I knew instantly that the marriage was over. There would be no reconciliation after such an act. There would only be careful, deliberate steps to protect myself and those I loved. Our marriage had appeared perfect for everyone who saw us. My husband was a respected professional, careful with money, and always attentive to our home. We had children who were healthy, curious, and happy, and we shared the milestones that every family celebrated: birthdays, holidays, school events. Friends often commented on how lucky we were, how stable our life seemed. And in many ways, that was true. We had stability, routine, and comfort, but the stability I experienced was fragile, built on lies I carried alone. The secret I had held for 10 years was not small. It was monumental, the kind of truth that could shatter trust in an instant. It went to the heart of our marriage, the foundation of our family, and the way my husband saw me. It was a truth about identity, a past mistake, and a deception I had carried with the belief that it protected everyone I loved. Yet with each passing year, the weight of keeping it hidden became unbearable. Every decision, every word, every interaction carried the shadow of the lie. I tried to live normally. I laughed at family jokes, helped our children with homework, attended social events, and maintained the routines expected of a wife and mother. Yet inside, the tension was constant. I had rehearsed moments in my head when I might reveal the secret, imagining calm conversations and understanding smiles. But I also feared anger, betrayal, and the complete unraveling of the life I had built. 10 years of marriage, 10 years of shared memories and 10 years of quiet fear came to a head in that one moment when I finally spoke. Our home in New York was both a comfort and a prison. The rooms were familiar, filled with furniture we had chosen together, pictures of vacations, school projects pinned to the refrigerator, and shelves stacked with books and family photos. Every object reminded me of what we had built, and every memory reminded me of what I might lose. I had walked these halls for 10 years, carrying a secret that could destroy it all. I had considered timing carefully. I waited until the children were asleep, until my husband was relaxed, until the distractions of daily life were gone. I thought the evening would allow for calm, measured conversation. But the moment I revealed my truth, all plans dissolved. The response was immediate, physical, and terrifying. The man I had known for a decade transformed in an instant. In those terrifying seconds, I understood that the danger had been real, the risk underestimated, and my need to act decisively had become urgent. After he choked me, I had no time to process emotionally. My body was shaking, my vision blurred, and fear consumed every thought. The betrayal was not only about the secret I revealed, it was about the man I had trusted with my life, who had chosen violence in response to my honesty. Survival became the only goal. I knew I had to leave, to protect myself, and to ensure that the act of violence could be documented and addressed legally. For 10 years, I had rehearsed the moment I would finally speak the truth. I imagined the conversation in countless variations. In some, my husband listened quietly, eyes soft, and we shared a moment of understanding. In others, he was confused, hurt, and frustrated, but we worked through it together. I told myself that if I prepared carefully, if I chose the right time, the outcome could be controlled. But the more I imagined, the heavier the secret felt. Every day, every interaction with him added layers of anxiety. I noticed the way he smiled at me, the way he held our children, the way he spoke to friends. Each moment reminded me of the life we had built and the fragile foundation it rested upon. I knew that my confession could destroy that foundation, yet I also knew that carrying the truth silently was no longer sustainable. I made lists in my head of what I would say, how I would phrase it, and how I would respond to questions. I planned the timing meticulously, choosing the evening when our children were asleep and the house was quiet. I rehearsed my tone, imagining calm and careful words, hoping to prevent panic or anger. I wanted honesty to heal, not hurt. I wanted the truth to bring closure, understanding, and the possibility of moving forward. Yet beneath the careful planning, a quiet fear grew. I realized that after 10 years of silence, my revelation could trigger a reaction I could not control. I had glimpsed anger before in small arguments and disagreements. I knew my husband's temper could flare unpredictably. The thought of him responding with violence had crossed my mind, but I convinced myself that it was unlikely that he loved me enough to control his anger. The evening arrived, the house was still. Our children were asleep, their soft breathing audible from the other room. I guided myself through the living room, heart pounding, mind racing. I sat across from him, trying to maintain calm. I rehearsed the opening lines silently once more, steeling myself for the moment I had postponed for 10 years. I began to speak, and the words came slowly at first, then with more force as the years of secrecy poured out. Relief flooded me initially. Finally, the burden I had carried alone was being shared. I imagined a gentle pause, a moment for him to process, a chance for understanding to take root. But that pause never came. His expression shifted almost instantly. The warmth, patience, and attentiveness I had known for a decade vanished, replaced by something I had not anticipated. Anger, cold and immediate, filled his eyes. His body tensed, and before I could react, he reached toward me. The world narrowed to a terrifying focus. Hands gripped my neck. I could barely breathe. Panic surged, sharp and immediate. My vision blurred, my chest constricted, and a sense of absolute danger overtook me. I realized that in revealing the truth, I had triggered a threat to my life. The secret itself was no longer the central issue. The violence it provoked was the reality I had to face. I fought instinctively, struggling to free myself, feeling the terrifying weight of his hands and the urgency of survival. In those seconds, everything I had known about my marriage, our life in New York, and the man I loved dissolved. I understood that the act of honesty, which should have brought peace, had instead revealed a danger that required immediate action. For 10 years, I carried the secret silently. Every day, I reminded myself why I had hidden it. I told myself it was for the good of our family, for the stability of our marriage, and for the happiness of our children. I convinced myself that silence was protection, that honesty could wait until the timing was right. But over time, the weight of keeping the truth buried became unbearable. Every smile, every shared joke, every quiet evening reminded me of the lie I lived with. Our life in New York seemed ordinary, even enviable. We had a comfortable apartment in a quiet neighborhood, friends who admired our stability, and routines that made life feel predictable. My husband was a professional, careful, attentive, and outwardly loving. To everyone who knew us, our marriage appeared perfect. Yet beneath that surface, I lived in constant tension, walking a line between honesty and self-preservation. The secret I carried was enormous, something that could destroy the trust and life we had built together. It was about my past, something I had never imagined revealing, and yet it affected the very foundation of our marriage. I had rehearsed the confession countless times, imagining calm explanations, measured responses, and eventual understanding. I pictured conversations where my husband listened quietly, perhaps shocked, but ultimately compassionate. Even though I rehearsed endlessly, fear always crept in. I feared anger, betrayal, and the collapse of everything I had built. I feared losing my husband, the life we shared, and the stability of our children's world. Each day I delayed telling him, the secret grew heavier. I noticed the subtle moments in our home, the way he leaned on the kitchen counter while talking to me, the gentle smiles exchanged over breakfast, the quiet evenings together. Reminders that the life we had created could be shattered in an instant. The weight of secrecy became a constant companion. Every decision I made, every word I said, was filtered through the lens of hiding the truth. I could not fully relax. I watched my actions, rehearsed my conversations, and carefully measured my expressions. I lived half in honesty and half in fear, balancing between the life I had and the truth I carried. Finally, the night came when I could no longer wait. Our children were asleep in their rooms, the house quiet and dimly lit. I sat across from my husband, feeling the tension tighten in my chest. The moment I had postponed for 10 years had arrived. I prepared myself, rehearsed my opening lines silently one last time, and let the truth escape my lips. For a brief second, I felt relief, a lightness I had not known in a decade, but that feeling vanished instantly. His expression shifted. The warmth and attentiveness I had known for 10 years vanished, replaced by anger, disbelief, and sudden, terrifying intensity. Before I could react, he lunged forward, his hands around my neck. I felt the sharp, overwhelming pressure of being choked. Fear consumed me entirely. In that moment, I understood that my secret was no longer the danger. The violence it provoked was the reality I had to confront. The life I had known, the trust I had placed in him, and the stability of our family dissolved in seconds. Survival became immediate, urgent, and absolute. For 10 years, I had lived a life of quiet tension. Every morning, I woke up carrying the weight of the secret. I poured coffee, prepared breakfast for the children, and moved through our routine while my mind constantly circled the truth I had hidden. Each smile I gave my husband, each playful moment with our children, was layered with the unspoken knowledge that everything could change in an instant. Our children were young when the secret began to matter, and over the years I watched them grow. Their laughter, curiosity, and trust became both a comfort and a burden. I wanted them to feel safe, to have a normal life, and to believe in the stability of their parents. I feared that revealing the truth could not only destroy my marriage, but also fracture their sense of security. Every decision, even small ones, was filtered through the lens of keeping them safe. The home we had built in New York felt both protective and confining. It was filled with furniture we chose together, photographs of vacations, school projects pinned to the fridge, and toys scattered across the living room. Every item reminded me of what we had created together and of the life I risked losing with one revelation. I spent years maintaining the perfect balance, walking through the house carefully, avoiding any hint that my mind carried a secret that could shatter everything. I also watched my husband closely over the years. He was charming, loving, and patient on the surface. To friends and neighbors, he was the ideal partner, but I had glimpsed moments of frustration and control that I previously dismissed. A harsh word here, a raised voice there, subtle ways of asserting authority. I cataloged them silently, unsure if they were meaningful, but aware that they hinted at the man's deeper capacity for anger. Those glimpses became part of the calculation I carried in my head, reminders of why honesty might be dangerous. Despite the fear, I knew the secret could not remain hidden forever. It grew heavier with every year, every conversation, and every routine. I felt it in the quiet moments when I was alone in our bedroom, the nights when I lay awake, listening to the sounds of the house, and the afternoons when I watched my children play. I realized that hiding the truth was no longer protecting anyone. It was eroding my own sense of self and my ability to live authentically. Finally, the night of the confession arrived. I chose the timing carefully. The children were asleep, the house quiet, and the world outside calm. I sat across from my husband, heart pounding, hands trembling slightly, and rehearsed my opening words silently one last time. I reminded myself to stay calm, to speak clearly, and to frame the truth in a way that emphasized responsibility and honesty. I hoped for understanding, for a response tempered by love, for a possibility of peace. But the moment I spoke, the carefully constructed calm vanished. My husband's expression changed instantly. The warmth and attentiveness I had known for 10 years disappeared, replaced by anger, disbelief, and intensity that I had never seen before. Before I could react or clarify, he lunged forward, hands around my neck, choking me. The sensation was immediate and terrifying. My breath caught and my vision blurred, and I felt the full, crushing weight of fear. In those terrifying seconds, I realized that the danger was not in the secret itself, but in his reaction. The man I had trusted for a decade, the partner I had believed loved and respected me, had become a threat to my life. Survival became my only focus, a cold, urgent priority that eclipsed everything else. I knew in that instant that the marriage, as I had known it, was over. There would be no reconciliation after this moment. There would only be careful, deliberate steps to ensure my safety and the safety of our children. Living with the secret for 10 years shaped every aspect of my daily life. Every conversation with my husband, every family outing, every casual interaction was filtered through a lens of caution. I smiled when I wanted to sigh. I laughed when I wanted to cry. I nodded when I wanted to protest. The weight of the lie pressed on me constantly, shaping my decisions and my behavior, quietly dictating the boundaries of my life. Even the smallest moments carried significance. Watching my husband play with our children, I often felt a mix of love and anxiety. I wanted to embrace these moments fully, but the secret lingered in the background, a shadow over my happiness. Every bedtime story, every gentle hug, every whispered conversation in the night reminded me of the truth I carried. It was a constant companion, invisible to everyone else, yet impossible to ignore. I tried to normalize the burden. I told myself that this was life, that every family has challenges, and that as long as we appeared happy, the secret could remain safely hidden. I compartmentalized my thoughts, storing the truth in a mental box I rarely opened. But the pressure never fully eased. Every decision I made for my children, for our home, for the marriage, was influenced by the need to maintain secrecy. There were moments when I questioned myself. I wondered if I was wrong to hide the truth, if honesty should have come earlier, and whether the years of silence had made the eventual revelation more dangerous. I imagined scenarios of understanding and acceptance, but I also imagined anger, betrayal, and even violence. The fear was a quiet, persistent undercurrent, shaping my actions and interactions in ways that others could not see. I also reflected on my husband's character over the years. He had been caring and loving in public, attentive and charming to friends and family. Yet in private there were occasional glimpses of volatility, a raised voice during minor disagreements, an impatience that flared unexpectedly, subtle attempts to control situations that did not go his way. I had noticed these moments but minimized them, telling myself they were normal, that every marriage had conflicts, that love required tolerance. The more I delayed sharing the secret, the heavier the burden became. Every year added layers of fear, guilt, and anxiety. I carried the knowledge that the truth could destroy the life we had built, yet I also carried the hope that when the time came, honesty could restore integrity and perhaps even deepen trust. But deep down, I knew that after 10 years, the act of revealing it would change everything irreversibly. Finally, the night of the confession arrived. I chose the timing carefully. The children were asleep, the house was quiet, and the soft glow of the lamps created a calm environment. I sat across from my husband, heart racing, hands trembling slightly, rehearsing my words one final time in my mind. I reminded myself to stay calm, to speak clearly, to frame the truth in a way that emphasized responsibility rather than blame. I hoped for understanding, but a quiet nagging fear told me that the reaction could be unpredictable. When I finally spoke, the relief I felt was fleeting. My secret was out, but instead of calm understanding, I saw something dark and unfamiliar in my husband's eyes. His expression shifted instantly from warmth and attentiveness to anger, disbelief, and intensity that shocked me. Within moments, he lunged, hands around my neck, and I felt the sudden, terrifying pressure of being choked. My body tensed, my vision blurred, and terror overtook every thought. In that instant, I realized the danger was not in the secret itself. It was in his reaction. The man I had trusted for 10 years had become a threat. Survival became immediate, urgent, and absolute. I knew the marriage I had known was over and that my focus now had to be on protecting myself and my children. The moment he released me, my body shook uncontrollably. My chest burned, my throat ached, and my hands trembled. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant tick of the clock. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened and what I had to do next. Survival became the only priority. I realized immediately that staying in the house was dangerous. The home that had once been a sanctuary was now a place of threat. Every room, every hallway, every familiar object seemed to carry the memory of violence. I needed distance, a barrier between myself and the man I had once trusted completely. I gathered my essentials, phone, wallet, keys, moving carefully so as not to provoke another attack. My hands shook as I packed a small bag for our children, ensuring their safety first. Once outside, the cold New York air hit me sharply, bringing a moment of clarity. I started driving, taking careful indirect routes to avoid being followed. The streets blurred past, but my focus remained sharp. I had to remain calm, deliberate, and calculated. Panic was dangerous. Survival required precision. Medical attention was the first step. I went to the nearest hospital, knowing the importance of documenting the injuries. The staff treated me professionally, recording every detail of the assault, bruises on my neck, burst blood vessels in my eyes, and the strain on my throat. Each note and photograph became evidence. I understood that this documentation was not only about care, but also essential for the legal battle I would have to fight. After receiving treatment, I contacted the police. I provided a detailed account of the assault, describing exactly what had happened and the circumstances that led to it. The officers listened carefully, documenting every detail, taking photographs, and recording my statement. I realized that this police report would become the foundation of my case, the first step in ensuring that justice could be served and that my safety was legally recognized. Next, I secured a protective order. Working with a domestic violence advocate and the authorities, I obtained an emergency temporary order that legally barred my husband from contacting me or approaching our children. The order offered a critical buffer, a layer of protection that allowed me to plan my next steps without fear of immediate retaliation. It was both practical and emotional, giving me the space to think and act strategically. I also began compiling a history of his behavior. Over 10 years, I had observed subtle controlling tendencies, occasional anger, and moments of intimidation I had previously ignored. Now, in the aftermath of the assault, these patterns became evidence of a broader trajectory of abuse. I documented dates, incidents, and examples, creating a detailed record that would reinforce the seriousness of the situation in any legal proceedings. I realized that the secret I had revealed, which had triggered the choking, could now serve as a lens to show his true character. The violence exposed the reality of his controlling nature. The confession, which I had feared would ruin our marriage, had instead revealed the truth about his capacity for danger and aggression. This understanding strengthened my resolve to act decisively. Once I secured immediate safety, I turned my attention to building a legal foundation. I knew that surviving the choking was only the first step. To protect myself long-term, I needed irrefutable evidence, a documented history of abuse, and a clear legal strategy. I began by carefully organizing everything I could remember from the past 10 years. Minor incidents I had previously dismissed, patterns of intimidation, controlling behavior, and subtle threats that now took on greater significance. Every note, every dated observation, every recollection became part of a growing dossier. I consulted with a domestic violence legal team, choosing attorneys experienced in high-conflict divorces and assault cases. I shared every detail with them, from the immediate attack to the decade-long history of behavior that had foreshadowed it. Together, we mapped out a step-by-step plan, securing protective orders, documenting injuries, filing for emergency custody if necessary, and preparing the divorce filing in a way that emphasized the abuse and protected my rights. The legal team guided me meticulously, ensuring that nothing could be overlooked or challenged later. Medical records were critical. I returned to the hospital to confirm that every bruise and burst blood vessel had been documented. Photographs were taken, written statements finalized, and medical staff corroborated the severity of the assault. I also kept a personal log of how I felt immediately after the attack, noting emotional trauma, fear, and the impact on my children. These records would become vital in court, showing not only the physical assault, but also the psychological consequences. Police involvement continued beyond the initial report. I maintained regular communication with the detective assigned to my case, providing additional details and clarifying timelines. I requested copies of the official report and ensured that photographs and witness statements were included. Every step was deliberate. I understood that thoroughness would be crucial if the case went to trial or if temporary orders needed to be extended. I also considered my children's needs and safety. Arrangements were made to ensure they were never in proximity to him during this period. School staff were informed discreetly of a protective order, and trusted family members were briefed on emergency contact protocols. My focus was to maintain a sense of normalcy for them while keeping them fully protected. Meanwhile, the secret I had revealed, the very reason he reacted violently, became a tool in the legal process. Framing the event in context, I showed that my confession was an act of honesty, not provocation. The assault was his response to truth, not wrongdoing on my part. This distinction was essential in demonstrating his abusive patterns and undermining any argument that I had caused or escalated the situation. The secret, once a source of fear, now reinforced the narrative of his aggression. As part of the legal preparation, I began drafting the divorce filing. The documents emphasized domestic violence, emotional abuse, and the urgent need to protect myself and the children. Custody arrangements were outlined with the goal of full protection, and financial settlements were structured to secure our independence. Every clause was intentional, ensuring that there would be no ambiguity and that the law would recognize the danger I had experienced. I also began compiling evidence of his behavior in social and professional settings. I gathered emails, texts, and any interactions that demonstrated control or manipulation. While these were less severe than the physical assault, they reinforced a consistent pattern of abuse that supported my case. Every detail, no matter how minor it had seemed at the time, now served a strategic purpose. With protective orders in place and evidence meticulously documented, I filed for divorce on the grounds of domestic violence. Every detail in the paperwork was intentional, from the description of the choking to the decade-long history of controlling behavior. Custody arrangements prioritized the children's safety above all else. Financial settlements were outlined to prevent my husband from leveraging our assets or manipulating the situation. I knew that any ambiguity could put us at risk, so every word was deliberate, every claim supported by evidence. The moment the court filings were submitted, the tension escalated. I could sense the weight of what was about to unfold. Legal action is not a private process. It involves documents, notifications, and formal proceedings. Each step was a reminder of the life I was leaving behind and the confrontation I had to face in order to secure freedom. Despite fear, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. I was no longer waiting for him to act. I was controlling the process, shaping outcomes, and protecting my family. Court hearings were scheduled, and I prepared meticulously for each one. I reviewed evidence repeatedly, rehearsed my statements, and coordinated with my attorneys. Medical records, police reports, personal logs, and correspondence were organized and cross-referenced. Every document reinforced the narrative of abuse. Every note underscored the danger I had faced. This preparation was exhausting but necessary. I knew that attention to detail would determine the outcome. During this period, I also maintained strict boundaries. Communication with my husband was limited to what was legally required. Any attempts at contact from him were documented and reported. Each interaction was controlled, each word carefully considered, and each step taken to prevent escalation. I understood that his capacity for anger had not diminished, and that remaining cautious was essential for my safety and the children's well-being. The legal strategy included leveraging the initial secret, the cause of the violent reaction, to highlight his abusive tendencies. Framing the confession as an act of honesty rather than provocation emphasized that his behavior was unjustified. This distinction became central in hearings, showing the court that the assault was a calculated act of control and aggression, not a spontaneous response to wrongdoing on my part. I also worked closely with child advocates and school staff to ensure that the children's routines remained consistent and secure. Teachers and counselors were informed about protective orders and potential court dates. I coordinated drop-offs and pickups through safe channels and ensured that the children were shielded from confrontation. Every detail was part of a larger strategy to maintain stability in their lives despite the chaos surrounding the divorce. As court dates approached, I faced intense emotional pressure. Anxiety, fear, and anticipation mingled, but I focused on facts and evidence rather than emotion. I relied on the support of my legal team, friends, and family who understood the stakes. Their guidance and reassurance helped me maintain clarity. I knew that the outcome depended not on emotion, but on careful, deliberate action. I also anticipated attempts by my husband to challenge claims, question the medical evidence, or frame the assault differently. My preparation included countering these possibilities. I organized testimony, corroborating witnesses, and professional statements. Every scenario was considered, every risk accounted for. This thorough preparation ensured that the narrative of abuse would remain intact and credible. Court day arrived, and the weight of anticipation was nearly unbearable. The courthouse smelled of polished floors and faint coffee, and the low hum of activity reminded me that this was a place of rules, order, and authority. I arrived early, my children safely with a trusted caregiver, knowing that my role was to face the process fully prepared. Every detail of evidence, every note, every medical record had been carefully organized and rehearsed. I was ready to speak truth, to document reality, and to ensure protection. As the proceedings began, my attorney guided me step by step. The process was formal, meticulous, and precise. I presented the medical records first, the photographs of bruising, the written reports detailing the assault, the evidence of burst blood vessels in my eyes and strain on my neck. Each piece of evidence was clear, undeniable, and corroborated by professionals. The court observed, documented, and noted the severity. Next, I provided police reports and statements. The detective who had taken my case submitted notes confirming my account of the choking and the circumstances leading up to it. Each statement reinforced the pattern of behavior, demonstrating that the assault was not an isolated event, but part of a broader trajectory of controlling and abusive actions over 10 years. The court listened carefully, weighing every detail, every corroboration. I also presented my compiled documentation of prior incidents, subtle threats, controlling behaviors, and moments of intimidation that had occurred over the decade. Dates, times, and descriptions were methodically organized, showing a clear, consistent pattern. The accumulation of evidence left little room for doubt. The assault was a culmination of years of underlying abuse. The legal team highlighted the context of the confession, the secret I had revealed that triggered the choking. They framed it as an act of honesty, demonstrating that the violence was his response to truth, not provocation or wrongdoing on my part. This distinction was critical. It showed the court that the abusive behavior was rooted in control and anger, not in any action I had taken, further solidifying the legitimacy of the protective measures and divorce claims. Throughout the hearings, my husband appeared visibly frustrated and defensive. He attempted to minimize the events, question the severity of injuries, and challenge the documentation. Each attempt was met with carefully prepared evidence, corroborating testimony, and professional statements. The pattern of his aggression and my careful, precise documentation left him unable to refute the reality of the assault effectively. I also coordinated with child advocates to address custody matters. Their reports and observations confirmed that the children's environment needed stability and protection from potential exposure to violence. The court considered their input carefully, understanding that the children's welfare was paramount. The protective orders were reinforced, custody arrangements secured, and restrictions placed to ensure no unsupervised contact. Every step of the legal process was deliberate, calculated, and emotionally taxing. I felt a mixture of anxiety, fear, and resolve. The tension was immense, but my focus remained clear: protecting my children, securing my safety, and holding my husband accountable. I understood that every detail mattered. Every note could influence the outcome, and every decision had consequences for the months and years ahead. As the hearings progressed, it became clear that the court took the evidence seriously. The medical documentation, police reports, and detailed records of past controlling behavior painted a vivid picture of the danger my husband posed. Every word I had prepared, every note I had meticulously kept, every piece of evidence collected over weeks and months now worked together to support my case. I realized that my careful preparation was paying off. The judge reviewed each document, asked precise questions, and weighed the testimony presented by child advocates and legal professionals. I answered with calm clarity, stating facts, referencing evidence, and remaining composed despite the anxiety simmering beneath the surface. I knew that emotion could be misinterpreted, but facts could not. The courtroom became a space where truth, meticulously documented and presented, had power over fear. My husband's reactions grew increasingly volatile. He attempted to challenge the severity of the assault, minimize the patterns of abuse, and argued that the protective orders were unnecessary. Yet with each objection, my attorney responded calmly and decisively, presenting corroborating medical evidence, police documentation, and a detailed account of past behavior. His attempts to control the narrative failed repeatedly, and I felt a growing sense of empowerment. The children's welfare became a focal point. The court considered testimony from educators, counselors, and child advocates, confirming the necessity of protective custody arrangements. I watched as the framework for their safety was established: restrictions on contact with my husband, supervised visitations, if any, and clear legal boundaries designed to prevent any exposure to further violence. Every decision reinforced the principle that their well-being was paramount. I also noticed subtle shifts in my husband's demeanor. Anger and frustration replaced his earlier attempts at charm. The evidence, presented calmly and with precision, exposed the reality of his actions. He realized that the violent act had backfired, that the assault had strengthened my legal position rather than intimidated me. The balance of power had shifted completely. Meanwhile, I continued documenting every interaction, every communication, and every potential attempt to challenge or manipulate the process. Even small details, text messages, emails, or phone calls, were logged carefully. This ongoing diligence ensured that nothing could undermine the legal protections already in place. Each record became another layer of security, another shield against potential future threats. Throughout this period, I also focused on emotional resilience. The courtroom was exhausting, the process draining, and the stakes enormous. Yet I reminded myself daily of the reason for my actions: protecting my life, my children, and securing justice. Each day, each hearing, each legal maneuver reinforced the importance of careful planning, attention to detail, and unyielding commitment to safety. As the hearings continued, the court began to take decisive action. Protective orders were reinforced, specifying strict boundaries and legal consequences if violated. My husband was barred from approaching me, contacting our children, or interfering with our routines in any way. The legal system created a buffer, a structured barrier to ensure our safety, and for the first time I felt a measure of security that had seemed impossible in the aftermath of the assault. The divorce proceedings advanced simultaneously, each filing, each documented piece of evidence, and each testimony added clarity to the case. Custody arrangements were formalized, giving me primary authority over the children's day-to-day lives. The court recognized that exposure to my husband could be harmful and that strict supervision or complete restriction was necessary to protect their well-being. Financial matters were also addressed, ensuring that I could maintain independence and stability for the family. Every decision reinforced the principle that the violent act had consequences and that the legal system could uphold safety and fairness. Throughout this process, my husband's attempts to challenge the orders became increasingly transparent. He sought to question the severity of the incident, challenge the medical evidence, and even question my credibility. Each attempt was met with the detailed records I had compiled, the photographs, police reports, logs of prior controlling behavior, and professional testimony. His efforts failed repeatedly. The very act of violence that he had committed became the strongest evidence against him, leaving him with no viable path to undermine the process. I also maintained meticulous documentation of any interactions, no matter how minor. Text messages, emails, phone calls, or attempts at indirect communication were recorded, time-stamped, and filed. This ongoing diligence ensured that the legal protections in place could be enforced and that any future challenges could be met with evidence. Each record was another layer of security, another reinforcement of the legal framework protecting me and my children. Emotionally, the process was exhausting. Court appearances, lawyer meetings, and constant vigilance took a toll. Yet I remained resolute. Every action, every decision, every document strengthened our position and ensured that safety, stability, and justice were maintained. I drew on support from trusted friends, family, and professionals, but ultimately I knew that the outcome depended on preparation, persistence, and clear evidence. By the end of this stage, the legal system had formally recognized the severity of the assault and the ongoing risk my husband posed. Custody, protective orders, and divorce proceedings were structured to prioritize the children's safety and my independence. The violent act that had once terrified me had, through careful legal action, become the pivot that secured protection, accountability, and the foundation for a new life. Even after the protective orders and initial divorce filings, vigilance remained essential. My husband, frustrated and angry, continued to test boundaries, sending indirect messages through mutual contacts or attempting to manipulate situations with the children. I treated every action as a potential threat, documenting it carefully, recording dates, times, and details, and forwarding evidence to my legal team. This ongoing monitoring became a crucial part of maintaining safety and enforcing the court's decisions. Each attempt he made to regain control revealed more about his volatile nature. He tried subtle intimidation, questioning my credibility with family and friends, and even made indirect threats through third parties. I refused to react emotionally, knowing that any response outside of legal channels could undermine my position. Instead, I cataloged each action meticulously, strengthening my case and ensuring that the evidence would show a consistent pattern of abuse. Financial security was another critical focus. I reviewed joint accounts, ensuring that funds were transferred to safe, separate accounts for the children and myself. I documented every transaction, knowing that financial control could be another form of manipulation. By securing financial independence, I ensured that my husband could not use money as leverage to intimidate, pressure, or coerce me during the ongoing proceedings. Parallel to this, I continued working with child advocates and school officials to maintain the children's stability. I shared protective orders and court updates with trusted staff, ensuring they were aware of boundaries and potential risks. This coordination prevented indirect contact and created a support system within the children's environment, further insulating them from potential emotional or physical harm. Every legal hearing, every submission, and every protective measure was part of a strategic framework. I and my attorneys planned weeks in advance, anticipating challenges, potential objections, and emotional escalations. I prepared statements, reviewed evidence, and rehearsed answers to possible questions. This methodical approach allowed me to face court proceedings calmly and with confidence, turning fear into structured action. Meanwhile, I maintained detailed personal logs. I recorded my emotional state, reflections on the process, and observations of my husband's behavior. These records, combined with formal evidence, demonstrated not only the physical danger, but also the psychological manipulation I had endured. Every detail, no matter how small, contributed to a comprehensive picture that reinforced the need for permanent legal protection. As weeks turned into months, the court process continued to demand focus and precision. Every filing, every hearing, and every communication with the legal team was critical. My husband's frustration grew increasingly apparent, manifesting in attempts to delay proceedings, challenge evidence, or intimidate through indirect means. I anticipated each move, documenting meticulously and remaining resolutely focused on the legal framework I had established. I also strengthened communication with key professionals involved in our lives. Counselors, teachers, and family friends were briefed on the protective measures and instructed to report any suspicious behavior. I ensured that every potential avenue for interference or intimidation was blocked by evidence-backed protocols. This network became another layer of safety, protecting not only myself but the children from emotional or physical harm. Financial oversight remained crucial. I monitored all accounts, tracked transactions, and ensured that joint assets were secured or transferred into accounts under my control. My husband's attempts to leverage finances as a method of intimidation were thwarted by careful planning. Every movement of money was documented, creating an unassailable paper trail that reinforced my legal position and prevented him from regaining any form of control. Simultaneously, I continued to document patterns of behavior that demonstrated ongoing threats or manipulation. Subtle attempts to contact me through friends, social media, or work channels were logged and reported to my attorney. Each record reinforced the court's understanding that the danger was continuous, not isolated, and that protective measures were not temporary but essential for long-term safety. Emotionally, the process was exhausting. The stress of hearings, preparation, and constant vigilance was relentless, yet I remained resolute. Focusing on the purpose behind every action, ensuring the safety of myself and my children, protecting our stability, and holding my husband accountable for his actions. Every strategic choice, from filing documentation to coordinating with advocates, reinforced a sense of control in a situation that had once been dominated by fear. By the end of this stage, the legal framework was nearly complete. Protective orders were strengthened, custody arrangements were clarified and finalized, and financial independence was secured. The culmination of careful preparation, meticulous documentation, and strategic legal maneuvering had shifted the balance of power entirely. The very act of violence that had once threatened me now became the catalyst for complete protection and control over our future. As the court proceedings neared their conclusion, I focused on leaving no detail unaddressed. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of evidence had to be airtight. My husband's attempts to disrupt the process were predictable, challenging minor details, questioning my credibility, and subtly trying to manipulate the narrative through his behavior. Each move was countered with meticulous records, corroborating statements, and strategic legal arguments prepared with my attorney. I continued to coordinate closely with professionals in our children's lives. Teachers, counselors, and caregivers were fully aware of protective measures, court dates, and custody arrangements. I created clear protocols for drop-offs, pickups, and communication, ensuring that the children were shielded from exposure to conflict or intimidation. Each interaction was carefully controlled, maintaining normalcy and stability despite the ongoing tension. Financial oversight remained a critical element. I reviewed every account, monitored all transactions, and ensured that the family's funds were secure. Any attempt by my husband to access resources or use finances as leverage was blocked through careful planning and legal mechanisms. I documented every move, reinforcing the evidence that he had attempted to assert control and that my actions were necessary for safety and stability. The court hearings themselves became a stage for reinforcing the truth. I presented evidence systematically, medical documentation of the choking, police reports, logs of prior controlling behaviors, and testimony from child advocates. Each piece of evidence strengthened the narrative, demonstrating a consistent pattern of abuse and the urgent need for ongoing protective measures. I remained calm, composed, and factual, letting the documentation speak for itself while avoiding emotional reactions that could be misinterpreted. Meanwhile, I documented every indirect attempt by my husband to contact me or influence the proceedings. Emails, texts, and even social media interactions were recorded, time-stamped, and submitted to my attorney. Each incident reinforced the court's understanding that the danger was ongoing and that the protective measures were not temporary but essential. The pattern of behavior became undeniable and the legal strategy solidified. Throughout this period, I balanced vigilance with careful planning for the future. I explored living arrangements, schooling for the children, and financial independence. I made decisions deliberately, ensuring that every choice reinforced safety and autonomy. The fear and trauma from the assault were still present, but they were now tempered by control, preparation, and evidence-backed legal protections. As the final hearings approached, I knew that preparation was everything. Every detail mattered: evidence, testimony, and the careful presentation of a decade-long pattern of control and abuse. I reviewed every file with my attorney, double-checked dates, cross-referenced police reports, and ensured that medical documentation was clear and indisputable. I wanted no room for doubt or misinterpretation. My husband's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He attempted subtle forms of intimidation, including questioning witnesses, sending indirect messages through mutual acquaintances, and trying to create confusion about custody arrangements. I treated every move as evidence, documenting it immediately and submitting it to my legal team. Each attempt only reinforced the pattern of his aggression and the need for strict legal enforcement. Coordination with the children's school and caregivers became critical. I provided updated protective orders, explained protocols, and ensured that everyone involved knew how to respond if my husband attempted to approach or interfere. I established clear routines for pickups and drop-offs, creating a protective buffer that allowed the children to continue their daily lives without exposure to conflict. Financial oversight continued to be essential. I reviewed all accounts, monitored transactions, and ensured that assets were protected from manipulation or coercion. By maintaining strict control over finances, I eliminated one of the few avenues my husband could use to assert dominance or create fear. Documentation of every transfer and balance became a part of the legal record, reinforcing the comprehensive nature of my preparations. During court hearings, I presented evidence in a structured, factual manner. Medical documentation of the choking, police reports, records of prior incidents, and testimony from child advocates were introduced systematically. I remained composed, calm, and focused on facts rather than emotion. The accumulation of evidence demonstrated the severity of the assault, the consistency of controlling behavior, and the necessity for ongoing legal protections. I also maintained detailed logs of my own experiences, documenting emotional responses, observations of my husband's behavior, and interactions that might be relevant to the court. This personal documentation strengthened the case, illustrating the psychological impact of the abuse alongside the physical assault. It provided context, showing that the danger was not a single incident, but part of a long-term pattern. The final court hearing arrived, and the tension was palpable. Every document, testimony, and piece of evidence I had meticulously prepared over months and years was now laid out before the judge. I sat calmly, knowing that this was the culmination of all my careful planning. My attorney guided me through each stage, and I presented facts clearly, focusing on the truth, the medical documentation, the police reports, and the pattern of abuse that had defined the last decade of our marriage. My husband appeared in court, visibly frustrated and tense. His attempts to intimidate or manipulate the proceedings were transparent. He questioned evidence, tried to minimize the severity of the assault, and even attempted to argue that protective measures were excessive. But every objection was countered with detailed records, corroborating testimony, and the accumulated weight of undeniable evidence. The very act of choking, the catalyst for all this legal action, now stood as the irrefutable proof of his aggression. The judge methodically reviewed every piece of documentation and listened carefully to the arguments presented. Custody arrangements were finalized, granting me primary custody of the children with full authority over daily decisions. Protective orders were extended, making it clear that any attempt at contact or interference would carry immediate legal consequences. Financial settlements were structured to ensure my independence, securing resources for the children and myself without risk of manipulation or control. As the judge delivered the rulings, I noticed a subtle but unmistakable shift in my husband's demeanor. His frustration and anger gave way to the dawning realization that he had lost all control. The violent act that had once terrified me now became the pivotal reason for his complete legal defeat. Every attempt to manipulate, intimidate, or challenge the proceedings had failed, and the court had sided decisively with the protection of myself and the children. With the final orders in place, I left the courtroom with a sense of relief and empowerment. The years of fear, anxiety, and careful planning had culminated in safety and independence. I knew that the immediate threat was removed, and that the legal system had provided the structure necessary to prevent further abuse. My focus now shifted to rebuilding life on my own terms, creating stability and security for the children, and beginning the long process of emotional recovery. The aftermath required ongoing vigilance. Even with legal protections, I continued to monitor communications, maintain detailed records, and ensure that the children's routines remained protected. I coordinated with school staff, caregivers, and family members to reinforce boundaries, creating a supportive environment that allowed the children to thrive despite the chaos of the past. Emotionally, the journey was exhausting but transformative. The act of telling the truth, which I had feared would destroy everything, had instead revealed the reality of the situation. It exposed my husband's violent tendencies, demonstrated the need for protection, and ultimately empowered me to take control of my life. The combination of courage, meticulous preparation, and strategic legal action turned fear into safety and vulnerability into empowerment. After the court rulings, life shifted dramatically. The immediate danger was gone, but the echoes of the assault and the decade-long tension lingered. Every day required vigilance, not against direct threats, but against the lingering fear and anxiety that had been ingrained over years of secrecy and control. I focused on creating routines that brought stability for myself and the children, anchoring our days in predictability, safety, and comfort. The children's well-being was my top priority. I monitored their emotional state, arranged counseling sessions, and ensured that school staff were fully aware of our situation. Their trust and sense of safety had been shaken, and it was essential to rebuild it carefully. I encouraged them to express their feelings, validated their experiences, and reassured them that they were protected. Gradually, we began to reclaim a sense of normalcy, even though the memory of the trauma remained. Financial independence became another cornerstone of rebuilding. With the divorce settlement and careful management of resources, I established accounts under my control, ensured that expenses were covered, and planned for long-term stability. Every financial decision was deliberate, designed to prevent vulnerability or dependency that could be exploited. I felt a renewed sense of control, understanding that security was not just emotional or physical, but also practical. Social and family dynamics required careful navigation. Some relatives had been aligned with my husband or had struggled to understand the situation. I focused on maintaining boundaries, protecting the children from undue stress, and fostering supportive relationships with those who truly prioritized our safety and well-being. This process was delicate, requiring diplomacy, assertiveness, and constant attention to the emotional impact on the children. Therapy and emotional support became critical. I worked with professionals to process the trauma, address residual fear, and rebuild confidence. The assault, compounded by years of secrecy, had left deep psychological scars. Over time, I learned to separate past fear from present reality, to recognize my own strength, and to trust my judgment. Every session, every reflection, and every step toward healing reinforced my autonomy and resilience. I also redefined personal boundaries in relationships. Trust was no longer freely given. It had to be earned through consistency, transparency, and mutual respect. I became more selective about who could be part of our lives, ensuring that the children were surrounded by safety, stability, and honesty. Each choice reinforced the lessons learned from the past decade. Vigilance, clarity, and self-protection were non-negotiable. Over time, a sense of empowerment replaced fear. The act of telling the truth, though initially resulting in violence, ultimately catalyzed freedom. I had survived, protected my children, and enforced legal accountability. Every step I had taken, from meticulous documentation to strategic legal action, had ensured that the threat was neutralized and that our future could be rebuilt on a foundation of safety and integrity. Life after the divorce required careful planning and attention to detail. Each morning I established routines for the children that emphasized safety, consistency, and stability. Breakfasts were calm and unhurried. School preparations were organized, and transportation was carefully coordinated to ensure no unexpected encounters with my husband. Every small detail mattered, from the route to school to the timing of pickups. creating a structure that the children could rely on. Evenings became a time for reassurance and connection. We spent time together reading, doing homework, and engaging in simple activities that reinforced trust and comfort. The children's laughter gradually returned, but underlying anxiety sometimes surfaced. I addressed these moments with patience, validating their feelings and providing explanations that reinforced their security. The process was slow, deliberate, and emotionally exhausting, but essential to rebuilding a sense of normalcy. I also created systems to maintain my own emotional well-being. Journaling became a daily practice, helping me process lingering fear, reflect on accomplishments, and monitor my progress. Exercise, meditation, and social engagement with supportive friends provided additional outlets for stress and anxiety. These practices helped transform residual trauma into strength, giving me clarity and resilience to face any ongoing challenges. Financial independence continued to be reinforced. I carefully managed budgets, planned for future expenses, and ensured that savings were protected and accessible. Every financial decision was made with foresight, creating stability for the children and myself. I also educated myself about financial planning and investment strategies, ensuring that the control I had gained was sustainable and could not be compromised by my ex-husband or unforeseen circumstances. Social interactions required careful navigation. Some relatives remained unsupportive or aligned with my ex-husband, making boundaries essential. I selectively chose whom to trust and limited interactions that could create stress or conflict. Over time, the circle of support solidified into a network of people who prioritized honesty, respect, and the well-being of the children. This network became essential to emotional recovery and daily stability. Therapeutic support for the children was just as important. I worked with counselors to help them process fear, understand boundaries, and develop coping strategies. Sessions focused on emotional literacy, communication, and resilience. Over months, the children gradually regained confidence and security, learning that their voices mattered and that their safety was now ensured. Each small milestone, a day without fear, a confident step into school, a moment of trust in a relationship marked progress in reclaiming lives disrupted by violence. I also reflected on personal empowerment. I became increasingly confident in decision-making, recognizing my own strength and trusting my judgment. Actions that once caused fear now reinforced autonomy, setting boundaries with family, enforcing protective measures, and maintaining control over daily life. The long-term trauma of the past decade had taught vigilance and resilience, transforming fear into purposeful action. Daily life included practical measures for safety. Home security was enhanced, communication devices were monitored, and routines were designed to minimize vulnerability. These precautions became second nature, forming a protective layer that allowed both the children and myself to live without constant fear while remaining prepared for any eventuality. Even after the legal battles ended, daily life brought challenges that tested my resilience. There were moments when memories of the assault resurfaced, unexpected triggers that reminded me of fear and danger. A sudden loud noise, a raised voice, or even a confrontation at school could bring back tension instantly. In those moments, I relied on the tools I had developed: deep breathing, journaling, and deliberate reflection. These techniques allowed me to respond calmly rather than react impulsively, maintaining control over my environment and emotions. One particularly difficult period was dealing with messages from extended family who questioned my decisions or minimized the danger my husband had posed. I learned to respond with clarity and firmness, setting boundaries that prioritized safety and emotional stability over appeasing criticism. Each conversation reinforced my autonomy, teaching me that protecting myself and my children was far more important than maintaining appearances or avoiding conflict. There were also moments of personal growth that reminded me of my strength. I enrolled in courses and workshops to enhance my skills and increase financial independence. Small achievements, such as completing a challenging project or managing household finances independently, reinforced my confidence. Each success became a building block, proving that I could thrive without relying on someone who had once endangered my life. With the children, I began creating traditions and routines that emphasized security and joy. Weekend outings, family game nights, and small celebrations became opportunities to rebuild trust and happiness. The children began to express themselves more openly, showing that they felt safe and cared for. Their resilience became a source of inspiration, motivating me to continue modeling strength, stability, and independence. Socially, I carefully curated friendships and connections that fostered mutual respect and support. I surrounded myself with people who understood the importance of safety, honesty, and emotional well-being. These relationships provided encouragement and perspective, reinforcing that I was not alone in navigating the aftermath of trauma and legal conflict. Practical challenges also emerged, such as navigating new living arrangements, managing school logistics, and maintaining a balance between work and family life. Each challenge was approached methodically, applying the same careful planning and documentation strategies I had used during the legal process. These small victories reinforced my sense of competence and control, demonstrating that I could build a secure and stable life despite past adversity. Emotionally connected, I noticed a gradual shift from fear to empowerment. I no longer defined myself by the trauma or by my husband's actions. Instead, I measured strength in my ability to maintain safety, nurture my children, and make deliberate choices that reinforced independence. The act of telling the truth, though initially triggering violence, became a defining moment of courage and self-determination, shaping the foundation for the life I was now creating. Over time, I began to notice a profound change in how I approached life. Fear no longer dictated my decisions. I could plan days without anxiety creeping into every choice, and I could trust in my ability to protect myself and my children. This shift was gradual, built on months of careful planning, legal strategy, and emotional work. Each day that passed without incident reinforced the truth that safety and independence were achievable, even after years of control and deception. Reflection became an essential part of my healing. I often thought about the past 10 years, the secret I had carried, and the moment I finally revealed it. The act of honesty, though it had triggered violence, became a turning point. It reminded me that truth has power, that standing up for oneself is necessary, and that courage can create safety and autonomy. I realized that my fear had not prevented me from acting, but had instead strengthened my resolve to protect my family at all costs. I also reflected on the lessons of vigilance. Documentation, attention to detail, and proactive planning were not just legal strategies, they were tools for survival and empowerment. From monitoring financial accounts to tracking communications, from coordinating with child advocates to establishing routines, each measure reinforced control and security. The discipline required in those months became a foundation for long-term independence. The children, too, continued to grow in strength and resilience. They learned that boundaries could be enforced, that adults can protect them, and that honesty is valued and safe. Their progress was measured in small, meaningful moments, confidently walking to school, sharing feelings openly, and participating in social activities without fear. Witnessing their growth reinforced my own sense of accomplishment and purpose, highlighting the importance of the actions I had taken to ensure their safety. Socially and emotionally, King, I embraced connections that encouraged growth and stability. Friendships based on trust, respect, and mutual support became pillars of my life. These relationships provided guidance, encouragement, and perspective, helping me navigate challenges and celebrate successes. I learned to discern between genuine support and influence that could compromise safety, building a network that reinforced autonomy rather than control. Practical independence became increasingly empowering. I managed the household, finances, and children's schedules with confidence. I implemented routines that balanced work, family, and personal well-being, ensuring that every choice contributed to long-term stability. The lessons of meticulous planning and careful attention to detail carried over into every aspect of life, reinforcing a sense of competence and resilience. Emotionally, I reached a point where fear no longer dominated decisions. I understood that vigilance and preparation were tools, not burdens, and that autonomy and empowerment were the outcomes of deliberate, careful choices. I recognized the courage it took to act, the strength required to protect the children, and the resilience needed to rebuild life from a place of trauma. Each step forward was a reaffirmation of independence and security. With legal battles behind me, daily life became a structured, calm rhythm. Mornings were quiet but purposeful. I prepared the children for school, double-checking backpacks, schedules, and routines to ensure their safety. Each step was deliberate, a small act that reinforced stability and predictability. The children gradually relaxed into these routines, knowing they were protected and cared for. Their laughter and confidence returned, a visible sign of resilience growing alongside mine. Evenings were reserved for connection and reflection. We shared meals without distraction, engaged in homework or creative activities, and discussed the day in ways that encouraged open communication. These rituals were carefully maintained to foster trust and emotional security. I encouraged the children to express feelings and ask questions, helping them process past events without fear. Over time, these simple acts became symbols of safety and normalcy, creating a strong emotional foundation for their continued growth. Financial independence and household management were fully integrated into daily life. I managed bills, savings, and long-term planning with confidence. Every transaction reinforced autonomy and security, eliminating potential leverage or control from my ex-husband. I planned for emergencies, ensured accessible funds, and maintained documentation, creating an environment where stability was not just immediate, but sustainable for years to come. Social relationships became a source of support and joy. Friends, extended family members who prioritized our safety, and professional networks provided guidance and encouragement. I carefully curated these relationships, ensuring that trust and mutual respect were the foundation. Each interaction reinforced the knowledge that my decisions prioritized well-being and protection over approval or appearances. Therapeutic support remained a key component of life. Regular counseling helped both the children and myself maintain emotional balance, process residual trauma, and strengthen coping skills. Sessions focused on emotional literacy, resilience, and strategies for maintaining independence. Over time, therapy reinforced confidence and self-reliance, while also validating the courage it took to survive, protect, and rebuild. As months passed, the sense of fear and tension that had dominated the past decade diminished. Vigilance remained, but it was balanced with empowerment. I trusted my decisions, relied on my careful planning, and observed the children thriving in a safe and supportive environment. The home, once a place shadowed by fear, became a sanctuary, symbolizing resilience, courage, and a reclaimed sense of control. Moments of reflection reinforced the significance of the choices I had made. Revealing the 10-year-old secret, filing a police report, and pursuing a divorce grounded in safety were not just legal acts. They were life-altering decisions that restored autonomy, protected children, and enforced accountability. The courage required to act in the face of fear became a defining element of personal strength, shaping the family's future and creating a foundation for long-term stability. Over time, life settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and empowering. The home, once a place shadowed by fear, became a sanctuary. Each morning began with quiet routines designed to foster stability for the children and myself. Breakfasts were unhurried, school preparations deliberate, and the logistics of transportation carefully planned to avoid unnecessary risk. Even small details, such as the timing of departures or the routes taken, were managed with precision, reflecting the lessons learned from the past decade. The children gradually adapted to this predictability, their anxiety fading as trust in their environment grew. Evenings became a time for connection and reflection. We shared meals without distraction, engaged in activities that encouraged creativity and communication, and discussed the day in ways that allowed the children to process experiences safely. Homework sessions were structured yet supportive, and we incorporated games and storytelling to reinforce bonds and emotional security. Over time, these routines became rituals, grounding the family in safety and trust. Moments of laughter, shared curiosity, and quiet companionship grew increasingly common, symbolizing resilience and the restoration of normalcy. Financial independence was no longer a source of anxiety, but a foundation for stability. Managing bills, savings, and future planning became routine. Every decision reinforced autonomy and ensured that no external influence, especially from my ex-husband, could jeopardize security. I maintained detailed records, monitored accounts, and planned contingencies, embedding a culture of preparedness that provided both reassurance and tangible protection. The act of controlling my own financial future was liberating, reinforcing that independence and empowerment could coexist with care and foresight. Social relationships evolved alongside these routines. I fostered connections that were supportive, trustworthy, and respectful. Friendships became a source of encouragement, advice, and stability, while interactions with extended family were carefully managed to prevent undue stress or manipulation. Through these connections, I created a network that valued honesty, emotional safety, and mutual respect, a sharp contrast to the control and deception that had defined the previous decade. Each positive interaction reinforced confidence and offered reassurance that I was no longer isolated or at risk. Therapeutic support remained integral to life for both myself and the children. Counseling sessions focused on processing past trauma, reinforcing resilience, and maintaining emotional stability. The children learned to identify feelings, communicate openly, and understand boundaries, while I reinforced strategies for stress management, self-reflection, and measured decision-making. Therapy provided a space to unpack complex emotions, build coping mechanisms, and celebrate progress. Over time, it became clear that emotional growth was not only possible, but sustainable, offering a blueprint for healthy interaction and personal well-being. The lessons of vigilance and preparation carried into every aspect of daily life. I had learned to anticipate challenges, to document carefully, and to plan strategically. These practices were no longer burdens, but tools of empowerment. They created a sense of control over circumstances that had once felt chaotic and dangerous. From monitoring communications and interactions to structuring routines and maintaining financial safeguards, every action reinforced autonomy. The discipline developed during the legal and emotional struggle now provided freedom and security, a paradox that highlighted the strength built through adversity. Reflections on personal growth were profound. I had discovered an inner resilience I had previously underestimated. The act of revealing a long-held secret, facing violence, and pursuing legal protection had been terrifying, but it had also catalyzed transformation. Courage, once abstract, became tangible through action. Decision-making, once clouded by fear, became deliberate and purposeful. Every measure taken to secure safety for myself and my children affirmed not only survival, but mastery over circumstances that had once seemed insurmountable. The children thrived in this environment of security and trust. They learned the meaning of boundaries, experienced consistent care, and developed confidence that had been eroded by fear. Their progress, visible in moments of open expression, curiosity, and independence, reinforced the necessity and value of every choice I had made. Witnessing their resilience and growth became a source of inspiration, a reminder that protection and empowerment extend beyond the self to those we care for most deeply. Even ordinary days were filled with meaning. Simple acts, preparing meals, helping with homework, reading bedtime stories, or sharing quiet conversations became opportunities to reinforce stability and connection. These moments, once overlooked, were now infused with significance. They symbolized the reclaiming of life, the establishment of safety, and the cultivation of trust. The ordinary became extraordinary through deliberate attention and care. Emotionally, fear no longer dominated decisions. I understood that vigilance was necessary, but it was balanced with confidence and autonomy. I trusted my judgment, relied on my careful planning, and observed the children flourishing in an environment designed for security and growth. The home, once marked by fear, now represented resilience, courage, and reclaimed control. Each day reinforced the knowledge that I had created a space where safety, independence, and empowerment coexisted, providing a sustainable foundation for the future. Looking back, the decade of secrecy and fear had been transformed into a story of survival and triumph. The act of telling the truth, confronting violence, and enforcing legal protections had not only safeguarded the present, but also created a blueprint for long-term resilience. Every step, from meticulous documentation and legal strategy to the cultivation of emotional strength and social support, demonstrated that empowerment and safety could emerge from even the most challenging circumstances. Life gradually settled into a predictable, safe rhythm, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without fear. Mornings were structured with deliberate care. I prepared breakfasts, ensured the children's school bags were packed, and confirmed that schedules and routines were consistent. Every detail, from coordinating transportation to double-checking backpacks, was done intentionally, reinforcing a sense of stability for the children. These small acts became rituals of safety, giving them confidence that they were protected and providing me with reassurance that our environment was secure. The evenings were dedicated to connection and family time. We shared dinners without distraction, worked on homework together, and engaged in activities that encouraged creativity and communication. Simple games, art projects, and bedtime storytelling became opportunities to reinforce trust and emotional security. The children slowly began to laugh freely again, showing the subtle ways in which safety and stability restored their confidence. Each moment of ease in our daily life was a victory, a testament to the deliberate choices I had made to protect them and rebuild our lives. Financial independence became not only a necessity, but a source of empowerment. Managing bills, overseeing savings, and planning for long-term security gave me control over our future. Every transaction was carefully documented, ensuring that no external influence, particularly from my ex-husband, could undermine our stability. I learned to budget strategically, save consistently, and make investments that ensured long-term security. This control over finances reinforced autonomy and reduced the risk of manipulation, giving both myself and the children a stable foundation for the years ahead. Social connections played a vital role in this period of rebuilding. I nurtured friendships with people who valued trust, honesty, and support. Family relationships were carefully managed, maintaining contact only with those who respected boundaries and prioritized the safety of the children. These social structures created a protective network offering guidance, encouragement, and reassurance. Over time, I realized that surrounding myself with trustworthy, supportive individuals was not a luxury, but a critical component of sustaining safety and emotional well-being. Therapeutic support remained essential. Regular sessions for both myself and the children helped process lingering trauma, develop coping strategies, and reinforce emotional resilience. The children learned to recognize and articulate their feelings, navigate stress, and build confidence. I worked on self-reflection, stress management, and reinforcing healthy boundaries. Therapy became a vital part of our lives, not only helping us heal from past experiences, but also equipping us with tools to navigate future challenges with confidence. Every day I reinforced lessons learned from the past decade. Vigilance, meticulous documentation, and careful planning were no longer burdens but tools of empowerment. Monitoring communications, organizing routines, and maintaining financial oversight were practices that provided real control over our environment. These strategies, honed during the legal and emotional struggle, became integral to everyday life, allowing me to act confidently rather than react fearfully. Each act of planning and preparation reinforced the knowledge that safety and autonomy were achievable and sustainable. Personal growth became increasingly apparent. I pursued education and skills development, enrolling in courses and workshops that enhanced professional and personal capabilities. Each accomplishment, from completing a project to mastering a new skill, reinforced confidence and independence. These successes, however small they might have seemed in the moment, were proof that life after trauma could be not only safe, but also fulfilling and self-directed. The children flourished in this environment of security. They expressed themselves more openly, engaged confidently in school and social activities, and developed emotional resilience. Observing their growth was profoundly affirming, reinforcing the value of the deliberate choices I had made to protect them. Their successes were tangible reminders that the difficult decisions, legal battles, and constant vigilance had not only safeguarded their immediate safety, but also nurtured their ability to thrive long-term. Daily life included routines that reinforced both emotional and physical safety. Home security systems, monitored communication devices, and predictable schedules created a controlled environment where fear no longer dictated behavior. I continued to educate myself on safety strategies and emergency planning, ensuring that both the children and I were prepared for unexpected situations. These measures provided reassurance and reinforced the foundation of independence and self-reliance I had fought to establish. Emotionally, I transitioned from fear to empowerment. Vigilance became a practice of care rather than paranoia. I trusted my judgment, relied on careful planning, and observed the children thriving in a safe environment. The house, once a place of tension, had become a sanctuary. Each day demonstrated that control, resilience, and autonomy were possible, even after years of secrecy, violence, and manipulation. Reflections on the past reinforced the significance of my choices. Revealing a 10-year-old secret, facing violence, and pursuing legal protection were not just acts of survival, they were transformative. Courage, once abstract, had manifested through decisive action. Independence, once threatened, had been reclaimed through careful planning and steadfast resolve. These reflections underscored that even the most challenging circumstances could be met with preparation, strength, and deliberate action, ultimately creating safety and stability for myself and my children. As the months passed, the rhythm of life became increasingly predictable and peaceful. I established routines that emphasized security, stability, and emotional well-being. Mornings began with calm, deliberate actions. I prepared breakfast for the children, ensured their school materials were ready, and double-checked schedules to prevent any unexpected disruptions. Every detail, from backpacks to departure times, was handled intentionally, reinforcing both their sense of safety and my own confidence that I was protecting them effectively. Over time, these small but consistent acts created an environment where trust could flourish, replacing the fear that had once defined our daily lives. Evenings were devoted to connection and reflection. We shared meals without distraction, discussed the day's events, and participated in creative activities that encouraged emotional expression. Homework was structured and supportive, but also allowed space for dialogue about feelings, challenges, and achievements. Art projects, storytelling, and simple games became rituals of trust and reassurance. The children gradually rediscovered joy and curiosity, demonstrating that consistent care and structured routines could heal even deeply ingrained anxiety. Each smile, laugh, and moment of engagement was a testament to resilience and the deliberate choices that had created this safe environment. Financial independence became an even greater source of empowerment. I managed the household budget, monitored all accounts, and planned for both short-term and long-term security. Every financial decision reinforced autonomy, ensuring that no one could manipulate or disrupt our stability. I learned to prioritize savings, investments, and emergency planning, providing a cushion that made both daily life and future planning manageable. This control over resources gave me a tangible sense of agency, reinforcing the lessons learned during the legal struggle and ensuring that the past could not compromise the future. Social relationships evolved to support both emotional health and long-term security. I nurtured friendships with people who valued honesty, respect, and mutual care. Family connections were carefully curated, maintaining interaction only with those who respected boundaries and prioritized the children's safety. Over time, I built a network of support that reinforced confidence, provided guidance, and offered reassurance. Each positive interaction reminded me that meaningful relationships could exist without fear or manipulation, and that trust could be rebuilt when approached carefully and intentionally. Therapeutic support continued to play a critical role. Counseling sessions for both myself and the children provided space to process residual trauma, reinforce coping strategies, and maintain emotional resilience. The children learned to articulate feelings, navigate stress, and build confidence, while I continued to practice self-reflection, boundary setting, and stress management. Therapy became more than a tool for recovery. It became a method of growth, equipping all of us with skills to navigate life independently, confidently, and safely. Vigilance and preparation, once sources of tension, had become tools of empowerment. I monitored communications, maintained structured routines, and documented essential details to ensure continued safety. These practices, honed over months of legal and emotional struggle, became embedded in daily life. They provided reassurance, reinforced autonomy, and created an environment where the children and I could thrive without constant fear. Each act of planning and foresight reaffirmed that safety and independence were not only achievable but sustainable. Personal growth became increasingly visible in everyday life. I pursued professional development opportunities, enrolled in courses, and expanded my skills. Achievements, both large and small, reinforced self-confidence and autonomy. Completing challenging tasks, managing household responsibilities independently, and cultivating supportive social networks all contributed to a growing sense of mastery over my environment. This process demonstrated that empowerment was not an abstract goal, but a tangible reality built through deliberate action, discipline, and resilience. The children thrived under these conditions. Their confidence grew, they communicated more openly, and they engaged actively in school and social environments. Witnessing their development reinforced the importance of the decisions I had made and the structures I had put in place. Every milestone, whether a small victory at school, a moment of independence, or a demonstration of emotional resilience, served as proof that the safety measures, routines, and emotional support were effective. Their growth was a reflection of the care, planning, and courage that had guided the past months and years. Daily life also included ongoing measures to maintain physical and emotional safety. Home security, monitored devices, and carefully planned routines created an environment where fear no longer dictated behavior. I continued to educate myself about personal safety and emergency preparedness, ensuring that both the children and I were ready for unexpected situations. These precautions reinforced autonomy, stability, and confidence, creating a living space that was both nurturing and secure. Emotionally, I experienced a shift from survival to empowerment. Vigilance was no longer driven by fear, but by intentional care. I trusted my judgment, relied on preparation, and observed the children flourishing in a safe environment. Our home, once shadowed by anxiety and tension, had become a sanctuary, symbolizing resilience, independence, and the restoration of control. Each day affirmed that safety, autonomy, and empowerment could coexist even after years of deception, secrecy, and trauma. Reflection on the past provided clarity and insight. Revealing a 10-year-old secret, facing violence, and pursuing legal protections were transformative acts. They not only safeguarded the present, but also created a foundation for long-term stability. Courage became tangible through action, independence was reinforced through careful planning, and resilience was built by consistently protecting the children and myself. These reflections underscored the strength gained through adversity and the importance of deliberate, thoughtful action in reclaiming a safe and empowered life. Please tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong to finally tell my husband my 10-year-old secret, file a police report against my husband for choking me, and choose to use the assault as grounds for an immediate and total divorce because this decision didn't just end her honeymoon early, it cost her the husband she loved, turned our parents against me, and left our family so fractured that my own children haven't spoken to their cousins in 2 years. And I'm sure she won't be inviting me to her next family event this year,